Tonight, imagine a sky that refuses to shine. The sun hangs there, pale and weak, as though it's been on a bad diet of ash and fog. Day after day you step outside and the world greets you not with light, but with a strange twilight, as if the heavens have dimmed their lamps and forgotten where the matches are kept. You squint, but the horizon doesn't brighten. Fields of wheat shrivel before they ever turn golden, and orchards drop their fruit like sulking children refusing to grow up. This is the year 536 CE, when much of the northern hemisphere found itself trapped in what historians would later call the worst year to be alive. You'd probably never make it through a single medieval night. But don't worry, I'll guide you safely through. So before we go any further, if this quiet company helps, you can gently tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Maybe lying awake in New York or drifting in a quiet room in London. Drop your time and place below, so none of us feel alone tonight. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You trudge into this 6th century twilight world, where the Byzantine historian Procopius mutters in his scrolls that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, which is the historian's polite way of saying, good luck not freezing to death. Crops wither, rivers skim with ice in midsummer, and famine makes itself at home like an uninvited dinner guest. If you thought your refrigerator looked sad after a long weekend, imagine one stocked only with dust, bark, and the occasional rat that looks just as hungry as you do. The ash, scholars now suspect, came from volcanic eruptions in Iceland or somewhere equally dramatic, sending particles into the atmosphere that scattered sunlight. You don't need to know about climate science to feel it. You only need to look at your neighbour's hollowed cheeks. It's the kind of year when your bread has less flour and more excuses. And if you were hoping for a warm stew, the closest thing you'll get is boiling weeds until they pretend to taste like cabbage. Spoiler, they never do. Walking through your village, you hear the muffled cough of children too weak to chase geese anymore. The livestock, once your family's security blanket, collapse one by one, their ribs poking out like xylophone bars. Even the cats, those eternal freeloaders of history, stare at you with a look that says, share that crust, or I'm switching owners. You feed them anyway, partly out of pity, partly because if the mice survive better than you, it's officially embarrassing. The cold isn't just inconvenient, it's insulting. You huddle by a hearth that smokes more than it burns, wondering if the gods misplaced their calendar. Summer feels like a rumour whispered, by someone with a bad sense of humour, and while you pile on every wool scrap you own, you still shiver. Fashion here isn't about runway shows, it's about resembling a walking sheep and hoping no one notices the fleas. Of course, famine has a way of rewriting social rules. Suddenly those rich landowners who once sneered at peasants for eating millet gruel are elbowing their way to the same pot. Everyone smells like smoke, everyone dreams of bread, and no one wants to talk about the fact that the emperor in Constantinople can do absolutely nothing about the ash in the sky. You can't decree the sun to shine brighter, no matter how impressive your crown looks in torchlight, and so rumours spread faster than fire in dry straw. Maybe it's the wrath of God. Maybe it's sorcery in the mountains. Maybe the world is ending, and you didn't even get to finish your ale. Every sermon, every fireside whisper carries the same undercurrent. We're in trouble. And it's not the manageable sort of trouble, like forgetting your sandals in a muddy field. It's the existential, should we start carving our tombstones early type. The famine bites hardest when you realise bread is no longer bread. Bakers, desperate to stretch flour, mix in ground acorns, bean husks, even clay. Yes, actual clay. Congratulations, you're now eating pottery with a sprinkle of salt. Each chew feels like gnawing on guilt and gravel, and your stomach protests like a drummer in revolt. If you thought gluten-free bread was challenging, wait until you try gluten plus rocks. Hunger sharpens your senses in odd ways. You find yourself watching pigeons with an intensity that would alarm modern birdwatchers. A frog hopping by isn't dismissed as slimy nuisance, but as future kebab, hold the stick. You joke with neighbours that the first person to faint in the street automatically becomes dinner, except you're only half joking. It's gallows humour. the kind you laugh at once before realizing your teeth are too loose to bite anything. Yet even in this dim, ash-choked world, people adapt. You gather nettles, dandelions, wild herbs, anything remotely chewable, and toss them into a pot with the solemnity of a Michelin chef. The resulting soup tastes like boiled regret, but it fills the belly enough to keep walking another day. Children learn quickly that play is a luxury, replaced by scrounging in fields for edible roots. You too discover the art of optimism, convincing yourself that thin porridge is comfort food if you just close your eyes while swallowing. And then, just when you think things can't worsen, winter arrives. But this isn't the cosy winter of storybooks. This is winter with an agenda. Snow piles on roofs until houses sag like tired old men. Roads vanish beneath drifts, turning every journey into a half-frozen gamble. You trudge through knee-deep whiteness, praying your boots, if you own any, don't spring. Leek's fingers numb, nose dripping. You wonder whether you're still human or just a mobile icicle waiting to collapse. There's no Netflix to distract you, no podcast to fill the silence. Entertainment is listening to your neighbour sneeze and betting whether he'll survive the night. Spoiler, the odds aren't good. You wrap yourself in rags, stare into the smoky dark, and realise your ancestors didn't survive because they were comfortable. They survived because they were too stubborn to give up, even when the universe felt like it was actively trolling them. By spring, what little seed was saved must be planted, though the ground still sulks beneath layers of frost. Each seed is a gamble. You pat the soil like a nervous gambler placing coins on a rigged table, whispering prayers that the sun remembers its job. Farmers become philosophers, arguing whether fate, luck, or divine intervention will decide the harvest. The only certainty is that your stomach won't wait politely for answers. Still, life in 536 wasn't all doom. People married, babies were born, songs were sung, though usually off-key and interrupted by growling stomachs. Human beings, oddly enough, cling to rituals. Weddings carried on with wilted flowers, feasts shrank to shared crusts, but they happened. And in those small acts of stubborn joy, you find a strange strength. It's not the kind of resilience that makes motivational posters. It's the weary, muttered kind. Fine universe, you win this round. But I'm still here. The worst year to be alive, some historians say. And yet, you still draw breath. The air tastes of ash, the nights ache with hunger, and the days blur into grey, but you endure. You tuck your children into straw beds. You stretch your stew a little thinner. You laugh at jokes that shouldn't be funny. And through it all you keep walking one twilight step at a time because giving up has never been an option. The year is 1347, and the sea stinks of promise and doom. You stand on the docks of Messina, Sicily, squinting at ships that have sailed from the Black Sea. Their sails flap lazily in the wind, but the air around them carries no ordinary cargo. The smell hits first, not salt or fish, but something sour, like meat left too long in the sun. Sailors stumble ashore, their faces pale, their bodies covered in lumps that swell like grapes gone wrong. You watch one collapse, coughing blood onto the cobblestones, and someone mutters a word that sticks like a splinter. Pestilence. The Black Death has arrived, tucked neatly in the fur of rats and the bellies of fleas. These ships are Pandora's boxes, and you don't even realise you're about to open them. Soon, Europe will be dancing to the rhythm of church bells tolling endlessly, a grim soundtrack that even the best medieval lute player couldn't make cheerful. If you thought your neighbours were bad at sharing gossip, wait until you see how efficiently they share. Plague. At first, you don't want to believe it. People get sick all the time. Maybe it's bad wine or mouldy bread, or that goat stew that smelled suspicious before anyone touched it. But then you see the swelling. Buboes, they'll be called later. Large and tender knots in the groin and armpit, black and red like bruises that decided to start a rebellion. You can't ignore the coughing either, wet and rattling, each hack spraying tiny death notes into the air. Even the toughest farmer looks like a candle burned halfway down. You'd think people would run, but in truth they stumble toward churches instead. Priests chant louder, incense swings heavier, and everyone whispers prayers like passwords that might unlock safety. You light candles in crowded chapels, half hoping God is listening, half hoping the plague can't find you in the crowd. Spoiler, it can. Faith is strong, but fleas don't care about your devotions. The fear spreads faster than the fever. A cart trundles by, piled with bodies under a sheet that flaps just enough for you to see a pale foot dangling. You know the line already. Bring out your dead. The phrase becomes the season's hottest catchphrase, though no one's rushing to buy the merchandise. You step aside, clutching your tunic to your mouth, as if fabric woven by your grandmother could possibly stop invisible death. Markets once bustling with gossip and onions now sit silent. Bread sellers vanish, not because they ran out of dough, but because they became dough for the worms. Cats prowl streets fat with opportunities. Dogs wander, confused, their masters gone. And the silence that fills towns is not peace, but the emptiness of absence. You never realise how loud life was until it stops. Of course, humans don't go down without trying odd remedies. Doctors in bird-like plague masks strut around, their beaks stuffed with herbs to purify the air. They look less like healers and more like confused storks invited to a costume party. You watch them prod patients with sticks, as if poking disease from a distance might make it less offensive. If modern medicine is a symphony, this is someone banging on pots and calling it music. People start blaming anything and everything. Bad air, bad water, bad neighbours. Some point fingers at foreigners, others at witches, still others at God himself. Flagellants march through towns whipping their backs, convinced pain will make heaven forgive humanity. You watch, wincing, as blood sprays, thinking to yourself that maybe someone should invent the concept of not helping. Meanwhile, fleas keep biting, utterly unimpressed by human theatrics. Death moves into your town like a rude relative who refuses to leave. One day your neighbour is chatting about the weather. The next, you're helping load him into a cart. Your cousin develops a cough and swears it's just from the smoke. You nod politely, even though you both know better. Your friend promises to meet you tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. Life becomes a series of unfinished conversations, promises left dangling like half-stitched embroidery. The smell is unforgettable. Fires burn in the streets, meant to cleanse the air, but all they manage is layering smoke on top of rot. You gag as you pass houses where windows are nailed shut, entire families locked in with their fate. Some sing hymns until their voices vanish. Others die so quietly you don't even notice, until silence presses against the walls. If you think survival means security, think again. Those who live are not necessarily lucky, they're haunted. You carry scars not just in your body but in your memory. You see empty chairs at every table, half-filled bowls left behind, shoes abandoned in corners. Children learn to stop asking why, because no one has answers. You whisper reassurances at night, telling yourself the plague will end, though deep down you're not sure. And yet, through the despair, odd moments of humour bloom. Someone jokes that you should marry quickly, since the priest has fewer clients to juggle. Another claims the fleas prefer people who smell good, which is the medieval equivalent of saying skip your bath and save your life. A cart creaks past, its wheels squealing, and someone quips it's the plague's official theme song. The laughter is weak, but it's laughter all the same. You keep eating whatever you can find, hard bread that breaks teeth, broth thin enough to see your reflection in, wine watered down to last longer. You look in the cup and mutter, "At least I'm not sober for this." Meals become rituals of gratitude, even if gratitude is for mouldy cheese and the absence of coughing at the table. Hunger you can handle, the silence of missing voices less so. Months blur into seasons. The plague rolls like a tide, sometimes receding, sometimes roaring back. You stop keeping track of time by feast days and instead count by funerals. It's a grim calendar, but it works. Villages empty, cities shrink, and still you go on. Because what else is there to do? You wake, you breathe, you search for bread, and you keep walking. By the time the plague burns through, Europe is forever altered. Some villages vanish from maps, fields go wild, vines crawl over empty cottages, and silence claims the land like a patient conqueror. But those who survive inherit a changed world. Wages rise because hands are few. Laws shift because order cracked. Even death, in its cruel way, has rewritten society. You, standing amid the wreckage, realize survival isn't just about breathing. It's about remembering. You tell stories of neighbors, family, the laughter before the silence. You carve their names into wood, whisper them in prayer, and promise you won't forget. The plague took their bodies, but not their echoes. and those echoes, stubborn as fleas, cling to the world. You cough into your sleeve, glance at the horizon, and wonder if the next ship that docks will bring spice or sickness. You've learned the two often arrive together. Either way, you're still here, somehow. Picture this. You're born into a world where summer is a rumour, and warmth is a rare visitor that never stays long. The year isn't written down on paper yet. Calendars are for people far in the future. But you exist around 20,000 BCE, during the last glacial maximum, the peak of the Ice Age. The Earth wears a frozen mask, and survival isn't just difficult, it's a daily negotiation with frostbite. Tonight, let me take you into that frigid world, where your very first breath emerges as steam, and your lullabies are sung against the sound of howling winds. Snow stretches across the horizon like an endless white desert. Glaciers carve mountains into icy sculptures. Rivers turn sluggish under thick crusts of ice, and the wind, sharp as broken glass, whips across your skin with a cruelty that even scarves made of mammoth hide can't quite soften. You curl into your fur bedding, a patchwork of reindeer, wolf, and whatever unlucky creature your kin managed to spear that week. It smells musky, smoky, and a little bit like regret, but at least it keeps your toes attached. You'd probably never make it through a single medieval night. But don't worry, I'll guide you safely through this Ice Age blizzard. The morning begins before the sun decides whether it wants to show up. You step out of a cave or a hide-covered hut, your breath immediately frosting the air like a cheap special effect. Food isn't waiting in neat rows of supermarket shelves. It's out there, running on hooves, hiding under snow, or swimming beneath ice so thick you could stage a hockey match on it if hockey had been invented. Spoiler, it hasn't. Instead, you and your kin sharpen spears, fashion nets, and prepare to gamble your fragile lives against animals that outweigh you 10 to 1. Your diet is mostly protein, which sounds trendy to modern ears, until you realise you don't get to pick between steak and chicken. You get mammoth if you're lucky, reindeer more often, fish on good days, and roots or berries when you stumble across them in the thaw. Vegetables? Never heard of them. Vitamins? Only exist as a mysterious force that decides whether your teeth fall out this season. Every bite you eat is hard-earned, and you swallow with gratitude mixed with exhaustion, because tomorrow you'll have to start the hunt all over again. Childhood doesn't exist the way modern families imagine it. There are no toys beyond a stick, no schools beyond watching your elders, and no cartoons except the flickering shapes cast on cave walls by firelight. Your playground is ice, your lesson plan is survival, and your teachers are parents who may or may not make it through the winter. Even toddlers are given tasks, carrying firewood, shooing away wolves, chewing hides to soften them into clothing. Yes, actual hide chewing. Forget teething rings. You cut your gums on moose leather. You learn quickly that fire is more valuable than gold. Of course, gold has no meaning here. A gleaming nugget is just another rock to stub your toe on. But fire is life's insurance policy. Without it, meat rots, water freezes, darkness swallows you, and predators sniff closer. You guard embers like sacred jewels, tucking them under ash, nursing them back to flame whenever the wind threatens to snuff them out. And when the spark fails? Well, that's why flintstones and desperate prayers exist. Your hands bleed from striking rocks, but sparks are the only applause you crave. Predators are a constant background character in your life. Saber-toothed cats slink through snowdrifts, their fangs long enough to double as knitting needles. Cave lions prowl the shadows, and wolves stalk in silent packs, their yellow eyes glinting like lanterns of hunger. You build fires at night, not just for warmth, but to remind them you're not an easy snack. Still, you know someone in your group will eventually stumble in the wrong place at the wrong time. Survival is never unanimous. Clothing isn't fashion, it's architecture. You wrap yourself in layers of hide stitched together with bone needles, sinew serving as thread. Boots are stuffed with grass for insulation, cloaks drape heavy on your shoulders, and hoods turn you into walking piles of fur. No one cares about your silhouette. The only compliment worth giving is, nice coat, you still have all your fingers. Jewellery exists, but it's carved from bone or ivory, talismans against the cold and spirits. Practicality reigns supreme. Your outfit's main goal is keeping your ears from snapping off. Inside your shelter, life is cramped but familiar. A cave's walls glow with ochre paintings, bulls and horses galloping across stone like ghostly reminders of hunts past. If you live in a hut, it's framed with mammoth bones, hides stretched across them like a prehistoric tent. Smoke curls out through holes in the roof, filling your lungs with a perfume equal parts comforting and choking. You sit cross-legged around the fire, gnawing marrow from bones, sharing stories half factual, half myth, all essential. It's not Netflix, but the flicker of flames across painted walls creates a cinematic effect that makes even tall tales believable. Illness, of course, doesn't politely wait for spring. Fever sweeps through your camp, coughs echo against the rock walls, and there's no medicine beyond herbs, poultices, and desperate hope. A shaman waves bones, chants, sprinkles powders, tries to coax spirits into mercy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Survival isn't about fairness. Children vanish in the night, elders fade like candles, and you learn to bury grief quickly because tomorrow demands your attention. But don't think life is all misery. There are bursts of laughter too, absurd moments where you can't help but laugh at the universe's cruelty. Someone slips on ice while carrying water and becomes an accidental human fountain. Another bites into frozen meat so solid it nearly breaks a tooth, muttering the Ice Age version of, "Well, that's dinner ruined." You joke that mammoths probably gossip about you. See that human with the crooked spear? Missed again. Humour is survival's sidekick, because without it, the silence would crush you faster than the cold. Every once in a while the sun does shine. Snow melts into rivulets, berries appear, birds return. You almost forget winter ever existed. Children chase each other barefoot, laughter echoing like bells across valleys. These seasons of reprieve are short, but they are sweet, like sugar dissolving on the tongue. You savour every moment, knowing ice will return, but determined to bank warmth in your memory for when the wind howls again. And then there's art, because even in the harshest climates, humans insist on beauty. You carve small figurines from ivory, perhaps of women with wide hips, symbols of fertility and survival. You paint animals with ochre and charcoal, hands pressed against stone as though to leave proof. I was here. I lived. The Ice Age doesn't care about your legacy, but you do. These images are your diary, your love letter to existence itself. Nights are long. You huddle with your kin, shoulder to shoulder, the crackle of fire masking the growls outside. Someone hums, a rhythm as old as breath, and others join, voices weaving together into a lullaby that warms you more than fur. You close your eyes, not certain you'll wake, but soothed by the sound of belonging. Sleep in the Ice Age is always a gamble, but in that chorus of human voices, you feel, however briefly, safe. The worst time to be born? Perhaps. And yet, as you curl against the stone wall, listening to wind batter the entrance and wolves howl their envy, you realise something quietly profound. You're alive. Against all odds, against the ice and hunger and fear, you have fire, family, and the stubborn will to see another dawn. And in this frozen world, that stubbornness is the only warmth that never fades. Imagine this. Your first cry at birth isn't greeted with cheers, but with a quick calculation. Who owns you? Whose field will your hands plough? Whose coin purse will your sweat fill? Tonight, let me take you into the long, shadowed corridors of history where to be born meant to be born into chains. Not the shiny kind you see dangling in jewellery shops, but invisible links of law, class, and ownership that locked you down before you ever learned to walk. Your mother wipes your face with a scrap of cloth, exhausted from labour, and she knows already. Your life is not your own. If you're in Rome, the master of the villa has more rights over you than your parents. If you're in a medieval estate, the local lord will. Claim your labour the way one claims rainfall, naturally, automatically, and without apology. Freedom is a concept you'll hear whispered about but never taste. It's like the medieval version of cake in the office fridge. Always promised, never yours. As you grow, your world is work. Not the 9 to 5 coffee break kind, but dawn to dark toil. Your body bent over soil so stubborn it feels personally offended by your hoe. Summers mean heat beating down on your back. Winters mean your fingers crack and bleed as you gather firewood that isn't even yours to burn. If you're in Rome, you might be shoved into mines so dark that daylight becomes a myth, or chained to a galley, rowing until your shoulders scream like unpaid interns. Every blister on your palm is a receipt written to someone else's wealth. Food? You eat what's left after the master takes his share. Porridge so thin you can see your reflection in it. Bread so coarse it could be used as sandpaper, maybe a scrap of meat if an animal dies inconveniently. You chew slowly, not to savour, but to trick your stomach into thinking the portion is bigger. Your body becomes fuel, and you are never the one driving the cart. Sleep offers no escape. You dream of running, of feasts, of laughter, only to wake on a straw mattress that pokes like a conspiracy. If you're lucky, the roof above you doesn't leak. If you're unlucky, you wake drenched, the damp settling into your bones like an uninvited houseguest. You turn over, sigh, and mutter, maybe tomorrow, though tomorrow promises nothing better. There's no career path to look forward to. Your trajectory is straight as an arrow shot into mud. You will do what your parents did, and your children will do the same. If you're born a slave in Rome, you might be sold at market, displayed, prodded, judged like livestock. Buyers check your teeth, your muscles, your scars. They haggle over you like you're a jug of olive oil, debating whether you'll fetch a better price now or in a few years. That's your introduction to adulthood, reduced to a line on someone else's shopping list, and yet you laugh. Yes, even here. A fellow worker cracks a joke while carrying a bale of hay. Don't drop it, or it might sue you for injury. You chuckle, even as sweat stings your eyes. Humour becomes rebellion, the only weapon not confiscated. You whisper sarcastic comments under your breath when overseers bark orders, tiny victories that keep your spirit alive. You mutter, "Sure, I'll just plough faster than the ox, just wouldn't want to upset the cabbage." Relationships are complicated. Marry, perhaps, but only with permission. Children, yes, but they too will belong to the estate or the household. Love is real, but ownership is stronger. Still, you hold hands in the dark, you steal kisses behind barns, you cling to small moments as proof that you are human and not just a tool. Hope, ironically, breeds in, the cracks of despair like weeds sprouting between cobblestones. Some try to escape. In Rome, fugitives run into forests or blend into cities, always looking over their shoulder for hunters with whips. In medieval villages, peasants flee to towns, hoping the town air makes free law applies before their lord drags them back. Few succeed, but even fewer stop dreaming. Dreams are the one frontier no lord can fence. Religion becomes both comfort and cage. You pray to gods or saints, asking for mercy, for justice, for crumbs of kindness. Priests tell you suffering is noble, that heaven waits with banquets and freedom. It's like hearing your favourite show has been renewed for another season. Only problem is you have to die to watch it. Still, you believe because belief is sometimes easier than despair, and then there are punishments. Step out of line, and the lash teaches you humility. Speak back, and stocks make you public entertainment. You stand there, wrists trapped, while passers-by throw insults, sometimes rotten food. You want to scream, but your voice would only add to the spectacle. You grit your teeth and whisper sarcastic revenge lines in your head, because imagination is safer than rebellion. Yet even here, beauty sneaks in. A sunrise over fields glitters on frost, and for a moment you forget the chains. Music echoes from a passing minstrel or a fellow slave's song, and it fills you with something untouchable. You carve patterns into wood scraps, you braid flowers into your hair, you tell bedtime tales to children. The masters can own your hours, but not always your spirit. That stubborn flicker is yours alone. Once in a while, fortune tilts. A kind master frees you in his will. A war disrupts order and you slip away in chaos. Or disease comes for the Lord's family, levelling the playing field in ways sermons never did. Fate, it turns out, doesn't always respect property rights. And in those rare moments, the chains crack just enough for hope to crawl through. But most of the time, you endure. Day after day, you rise, you labour, you collapse. You crack jokes, you whisper prayers, you cling to scraps of joy. You survive because that's what humans do, even when survival feels more like stubbornness than triumph. And though history might not remember your name, it remembers your sweat. It remembers the hands that built, ploughed, harvested, cooked, rowed, and carried. The world is balanced on the backs of those who were never free. Born into slavery, born into servitude, the worst time to be born? Perhaps. And yet, even here, you breathe. And each breath, ragged though it may be, is defiance enough. The smell hits you first. Not the warm, yeasty perfume of bread or the sweet smoke of a hearth, but the acrid sting of fear, sharp and metallic, hanging over cobblestone towns like a second fog. Tonight, let me take you into 16th and 17th century Europe, where the word witch could flip your life upside down faster than a spilled tankard of ale. This is the age of paranoia, when neighbours eyed each other like suspicious cats, and the line between bad luck and black magic was as thin as a broomstick bristle. You're born into this world as a woman, unlucky already since your gender comes with footnotes that read, easily tempted, easily blamed. But men weren't always safe either. If you limped, mumbled prayers too loudly, or just owned a goat with an inconvenient attitude, you could find yourself on the wrong side of justice. And by justice, I mean a court run by men who thought sneezing at the wrong moment was evidence of witchcraft. If modern people worry about cancel culture, you'd laugh bitterly. At least they don't end with their toes in the fire. Your daily life is simple. You spin, you bake, you raise children, you mend. But simplicity doesn't protect you. One morning, a neighbour's cow dries up and suddenly the whispers start. Didn't she look at that cow funny last week? Didn't her bread rise suspiciously well during the last famine? Didn't her cat give me a dirty look? Within hours, your name is rolling across tongues like dice in a gambler's hand. You can feel suspicion wrap around you like ivy, choking before you even realise the game has begun. Accusations spread like wildfire, and in these times, wildfire doesn't come with fire brigades. It comes with gossip, with church sermons warning of the devil's agents, with pamphlets filled with lurid tales of broomstick rides and pacts sealed in blood. You could be the most boring, porridge-eating, hymn-singing villager on earth, but if someone wanted your land or disliked your face or simply woke up cranky, congratulations, you're a witch now. Trials begin with questions so absurd they'd make a toddler blush. Did you consort with demons? Did you fly at night? Did you curse your neighbour's turnips? You might protest, laugh nervously, shake your head, but laughter only convinces them more. Everyone knows witches laugh. You fall silent, but silence is suspicious too. Only witches stay quiet when accused, they mutter. You can't win. It's like playing chess against someone who insists the pawns are secretly dragons, and checkmate is whatever they say it is. The evidence piles up quickly. Do you have a birthmark? That's a witch's teat. A mole? Clearly where Satan feeds his minions. Did your butter curdle? Proof you've spoiled it with spells. Even your wrinkles can be damning. Apparently time itself conspired with the devil to etch its work on your face. One poor midwife delivers a stillborn child, and suddenly she's accused of stealing its soul. You look around and realise everyone's guilty of something if the judges squint hard enough. Then comes the testing. They might strip you down and search for hidden marks, poking your skin with pins to see if you bleed. If a spot feels numb, which, let's be honest, is common when you're freezing half to death, they declare it proof of witchcraft. Or they dunk you in water. Float, guilty, the water rejects you. Sink, innocent, but drowned. Either way, you lose. Someone must have written the rules on the back of a joke scroll, but no one's laughing now. And yet, through this madness, the townsfolk convince themselves they are righteous. They think they're saving souls, purging evil, protecting crops. You watch them march to the gallows square with torches in hand, whispering prayers, as if setting fire to your neighbour somehow makes God smile brighter. If irony could set off bells, the churches would never know silence again. The fear spreads so thickly that you start censoring yourself. You stop humming in the evenings in case someone calls it a spell. You avoid pets because a loyal dog is fine, but a loyal cat is suspicious. You bake bread badly on purpose, because if it rises too perfectly, someone might accuse you of bargaining with demons. Imagine living in a world where being mediocre was your best survival strategy. Congratulations, you've just invented the witch hunt lifestyle. Of course, men in cloaks write fat books explaining how to spot witches. The Malleus Maleficarum becomes the medieval equivalent of a bestseller, its pages dripping with paranoia dressed up as scholarship. Priests wave it like a holy manual, quoting passages with the same energy modern fans quote their favourite shows. The difference? This book doesn't just ruin a season finale, it ruins lives, thousands of them, and you notice something else. Often, the accused are the vulnerable, widows with no protector. women who own a patch of land that someone else covets, herbalists who know too much about plants, healers who charge less than the official doctor. In short, anyone inconvenient. It's less about devils and more about power, though no one admits it aloud. If Satan truly ran Europe, he must have been exhausted from signing so many imaginary contracts. Still, amid the horror, absurdity sneaks in. One villager swears he saw a woman turn into a hare and hop across a field. Another insists witches stole his manhood and kept it in a nest. You can't help but roll your eyes, even if you risk the stake for it. Really, Hans? Maybe the problem isn't witches, maybe it's you, but reason rarely wins arguments in this climate. Hysteria is the town's favourite drink, and everyone's drunk on it. By the time you stand in the square, accused and condemned, you understand the cruel rhythm. A rope waits, or a firewood pile crackles, while the crowd mutters prayers mixed with gossip. Some look away in pity, others lean forward, eager for spectacle. Children clutch their mothers' skirts, half terrified, half entertained. You stand there, heart pounding, and you realise the true terror isn't death. It's that your life has been reduced to someone else's story about demons and goats, and yet your humanity leaks through even then. You might shout your innocence. You might stay silent, eyes blazing with defiance, or you might whisper forgiveness, baffling those who condemn you. Whatever you choose, your breath becomes testimony, your final act proof that fear cannot erase dignity. When the flames die or the rope slackens, the town scatters, life resumes. People return to their porridge, their spinning wheels, their prayers. But the whispers remain, curling in alleys, echoing in dreams. Everyone knows another accusation is just a season away. Fear never retires. It just waits for the next unlucky scapegoat. The worst time to be born? In an age where your innocence could be twisted into guilt, where your very face could become evidence, where laughter, cats, or well-baked bread marked you for death. And yet, you lived as fully as you could, weaving small joys between shadows. You sang softly when no one listened. You told stories by the hearth. You carved hope into your children's hearts. Because even when the world hunts you, you insist on being more than their fears. The chamber smells of sweat, lavender, and fear. Tonight, let me take you into a room where women grip wooden bedposts with white knuckles, where prayers outnumber medical supplies, and where childbirth in the medieval world is less miracle and more gamble. You arrive in this story not as the crying infant, but as the mother on the straw-stuffed mattress, back-arched, breath-ragged, body at war with itself. If modern birth announcements sparkle with balloons and hashtags, here the announcement is simpler. She lived, or, more often, she didn't. From the moment you first feel the child stirring, the countdown begins. Your belly swells beneath the layers of wool, your ankles ache, and your neighbours whisper advice with the solemn authority of people who survived once and therefore know everything. Eat this herb. Don't eat that fish. Tie this charm to your girdle, it'll keep the devil away. You nod politely because refusing advice in a medieval village is like refusing a casserole at a family dinner, socially impossible, even if you're sceptical. When the time comes, men are banished from the room. Birth is women's work, bloody and sacred, carried on in chambers heavy with smoke from candles and herbs. A midwife arrives, sleeves rolled up, clutching a bag that contains everything from knives to holy water. She's part doctor, part priest, part gambler, balancing her knowledge of the herbs with whispered prayers that heaven intervenes kindly. If the local priest is nearby, he hovers outside, muttering blessings through the door because even God apparently respects the no men allowed rule. The pain starts as a rhythm, then rises like a storm. You groan, bite down on cloth, dig your nails into wood, forget. Epidurals. Your only anaesthesia is grit. Maybe a sip of ale if someone remembers to pass it. You sweat until your hair clings to your temples, until the sheets beneath you turn damp. The midwife presses your belly, mutters instructions. Push, breathe, don't give up. As if giving up were even possible when a small human is determined to exit through a space not designed for comfort. Superstition mingles with medicine. Women scatter ashes in corners to chase away evil spirits. They place iron under your bed, convinced it will repel demons. Someone sprinkles holy water, someone else hangs garlic, and at least one person mutters about the moon. You want to scream, "Forget the moon, bring me a miracle," but your lungs are too busy howling with the next contraction. Complications are common. If the baby comes feet first, gasps ripple through the room. Breech births are omens, some say curses, and rarely end well. If labour stalls, the midwife ties knots, unties knots, sprinkles powders, recites charms, anything to coax the child forth. Meanwhile, you drift in and out of consciousness, your mind floating on pain's tide. You imagine angels, or perhaps you imagine running away into the woods where wolves seem friendlier than childbirth. And then, perhaps, the cry arrives. Thin, reedy, miraculous. The midwife lifts a slippery, wriggling bundle, smacks it until the lungs remember their job, then wraps it in linen. Relief surges through you, though your body still shakes, your blood still pools. You smile weakly, thinking the ordeal is over. Spoiler, it isn't. Many women die not during birth, but after, from fevers that creep into the body through unseen pathways. They call it childbed fever, though really it's infection, a word no one knows yet. If you survive a week, people breathe easier. If you survive a month, they call it luck. And what of the child? Infant mortality hovers like a crow at the window. A third may not live to see their first birthday. You nurse, rock, sing, pray, but prayers don't always win. Small graves dot every churchyard, tiny markers for tiny lives. Each loss cuts deep, but grief is so common it almost becomes routine. You cry, then you get up and work, because life doesn't pause for sorrow in a world where survival already runs on thin margins. Yet, amid all this danger, there is community. Women gather around you, their presence a wall against despair. They wipe your brow, hold your hands, share their stories. I thought I'd die, one admits, but here I am. I lost one, another whispers, but then came 3 more. These voices stitch you into a tapestry of resilience. Childbirth here is not private suffering, it's communal endurance, the shared understanding that life is both fragile and stubborn. And humour astonishingly sneaks in. Between contractions, someone jokes that husbands should experience this pain once to learn gratitude. Another mutters that if men gave birth, there'd be entire feasts dedicated to it, with parades and free ale. You laugh, even while screaming, because sarcasm is the only spice strong enough to cut through the ache. After the birth, confinement begins. You're expected to stay in bed for weeks, though the reality of chores, animals and fields often drags you up sooner. Your body heals slowly, scarred and stretched, while whispers in the village debate your future. Will you bear again? Will you live long enough to raise the ones you've birthed? Every pregnancy is another roll of the dice. In the lottery of medieval childbirth, the house always wins more often than the players. Still, you find moments of joy. Your baby's fist curls around your finger. Their breath warms your chest. You hum lullabies soft as candlelight, even while wondering if you'll both survive the winter. Life is precarious, but life is here, clinging stubbornly to your breast. You love fiercely, because you know love might be short. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is not when famine or war rage outside, but when danger waits in your very own body, when the simple act of giving life demands you risk losing yours, and yet millions of women endured, survived, raised children who would grow into peasants, knights, monks, and kings. History was carried into the future on their blood, their courage, and their weary whispered prayers. So you lie there, sore, half delirious, clutching your newborn. Outside, the bells toll for another woman who didn't make it. But tonight, for now, you are alive. And in the fragile quiet of the chamber, you allow yourself a rare, exhausted smile. The first breath you take on a winter's dawn tastes like wood smoke and hunger. Tonight, let me carry you into the bone-cracking chill of a medieval peasant winter, where each day feels like a dare from the universe, and survival is less about strength than stubbornness. Summer's green fields are a memory, autumn's harvest bins are already thinning, and now, in the dead season, your belly growls louder than the wolves at the edge of the forest. You rise before the sun because the sun doesn't bother showing up until late. The hut is dark, the fire a sulky pile of grey embers. You shuffle across dirt floors, toes numb, straw crunching underfoot. Your breath puffs little ghosts into the air, proof that even indoors you're never truly safe from frost. Outside, the snow lies heavy on the roof, and icicles grip the eaves like teeth ready to snap. You pull your wool cloak tighter, scratchy, patched, smelling faintly of sheep and smoke, and mutter a prayer that today at least your roof holds. Food is the central drama of every winter day. In autumn, you stacked grain sacks like fortresses, hung meat in the rafters, salted what you could. But December has a way of shrinking plenty into scarcity. You open the larder and find not abundance, but crumbs, jars with suspicious smells and cheese so hard it could double as a weapon. Bread is your staple, but by midwinter the flour is mixed with ground peas, beans, even sawdust if things go badly. Each loaf becomes less food and more experiment in edible resilience. Meat? Rare. You might slaughter a pig in November, but without refrigeration it vanishes fast, devoured at feasts or rotting before you finish. By January you're gnawing on bacon rinds and wishing bones. Sometimes, in truly desperate times, people grind the hides of animals into gelatinous soups. Leather stew, the medieval equivalent of don't ask what's in it. You joke, dryly, that at least the boots are filling. Beer and ale are your liquid salvation. Water is too risky, often carrying sickness. But ale, weak and cloudy, fills the gap. Children drink it, old folks drink it, and by February everyone smells faintly like a half-fermented brewery. Someone quips that even the cows are tipsy since the leftover mash goes into their troughs. And when the ale spoils, congratulations, you've just discovered despair in liquid form. The body weakens under hunger. Children's cheeks hollow, elders lose strength. Coughs echo through huts, each one a warning that sickness has arrived. Pneumonia, fevers, frostbite. They stalk villages like grim creditors collecting overdue bills. There are herbs, yes, and charms muttered by wise women, but no antibiotics, no hospitals. You sit by the fire at night listening to someone wheeze, praying their breath continues until morning. The silence, when it comes, is heavier than snow. Still, life goes on. Chores don't freeze just because you're freezing. Animals must be fed, stalls mucked, water hauled from wells that crack your hands open with cold. You trudge to the woods for firewood, cursing when your axe bounces off knots, hands blistering, nose dripping. Sometimes the forest feels alive, branches creaking like laughter at your misery, crows watching with black-eyed judgment. Wolves follow at a distance, not brave enough to attack in daylight, but bold enough to remind you you're not the only one starving. Nights are long. You crowd around the hearth, family press shoulder to shoulder, trading warmth like a shared secret. The fire is stingy, smoke curling into your eyes, and you cough until your chest rattles. Someone tells a story about saints, about ghosts, about summer fields, and the children listen, eyes wide. You laugh at absurd tales, not because they're funny, but because laughter keeps despair from chewing through the walls. Clothing is no luxury either. Wool tunics patched beyond recognition, mittens made from scraps, boots stuffed with straw, layers upon layers until you resemble a walking haystack. You joke that fashion in winter is simple, whatever keeps your ears attached. Even so, frostbite nibbles fingers and toes. The unlucky lose them entirely, and suddenly you're nicknamed Three-Fingered Martin, as if mutilation were just another personality quirk. Sometimes famine hits hard. In the great famines of the early 14th century, rains ruined harvests for years, grain rotted in the fields, and desperation sank to unthinkable depths. People ate grass, bark, even, whispered quietly, the flesh of the dead. You pretend not to believe those stories, but in the darkest hours, you wonder how far hunger would push you. That's the thing about winter. It strips away illusions, leaving only what you're truly made of. And yet, amid the bleakness, moments of odd beauty appear. The snow glitters in moonlight like scattered jewels. Icicles chime in the wind, turning your hut into an accidental cathedral. On rare, clear nights, stars sprawl across the sky so brightly you swear you could scoop them up like grains. For a moment you feel small, yes, but also strangely comforted. The same stars watch everyone. Lords in their castles, peasants in their huts, wolves in the forest. You all endure under the same frozen ceiling. The church is a lifeline. Bells call you to huddle in stone chapels, breath clouding the air as hymns rise in shaky harmony. Priests thunder about sin, famine as punishment, but they also bless bread, light candles, and remind you heaven is warm, full of feasts and blissfully wolf-free. You cling to that promise the way you cling to your cloak, thin, patched, but better than nothing. Festivals, too, punctuate the misery. At Christmas, you feast on what remains of your pig, drink until laughter drowns out hunger, dance until your boots wear thin. Candlemas, St. Bridget's Day. Each holiday a pause button, a reminder that life is not only survival, but ritual, song, community. For a few hours you forget famine, you forget frostbite, and you remember what joy tastes like. But the hunger always returns. By February the stores are nearly empty. You scrape pots, lick crumbs, chew on bones already boiled thrice. Children cry at night, stomachs gnawing themselves into silence. You tuck them close, whisper lies about spring, about green fields, about bread so soft it melts in the mouth. You almost believe yourself, because belief is all you have left. And then, one day, the thaw begins. The snow recedes, timid streams trickle, the sun feels less like a joke. Green shoots appear, fragile and defiant. You gather nettles, sorrel, wild herbs, the first fresh taste in months. Your body, weakened but stubborn, gulps down this green promise. For the first time in endless weeks, hope tastes real. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into the long jaws of a medieval winter, when famine and frost shake hands and squeeze humanity like a vice. And yet, even then, people endure. They curse, they laugh, they cling to each other, they scrape survival from bark and prayer. Because winter may be cruel, but stubbornness is crueler. Picture yourself standing in a muddy field at dawn, a wooden pike shoved into your hands, the damp chill already soaking through boots that don't quite fit. Tonight, let me take you into the lives of those born to be cannon fodder, soldiers whose existence, in war after war, was less about glory and more about being the expendable numbers that kings and generals scribbled on parchment. You don't get a choice. In the Napoleonic era, conscription sweeps through villages like a cold wind, your name pulled, your body demanded, your mother left weeping at the door. In ancient times, a spear is thrust at you by your chieftain. In the First World War, a crisp uniform arrives with a train ticket to the trenches. Across centuries, the script is the same. You're not a person, you're a piece on someone else's board. And if you complain, congratulations, you've just discovered desertion charges. Spoiler, they don't end well. The training, if it exists at all, is laughably brief. In medieval levies, you might be shown how to hold a spear without stabbing your own foot. In Napoleonic France, you're drilled until your body aches, marching back and forth like a human wind-up toy. In 1914, officers yell at you until you know how to run, crouch, and die in rhythm with the rest. You half joke with your fellow recruits that the main lesson is learning to look like you know what you're doing, even when you don't. And then comes the march. Always the march. Mile after mile, boots grinding blisters into your feet, the weight of armour or packs bending your spine. You dream of beds, of bread, of quiet, but reality is mud, sweat, and the endless clatter of weapons on your back. Someone always faints, someone always deserts, someone always mutters prayers. You mutter too, though yours sound more like sarcasm. Surely the enemy will surrender when they see how impressively we bleed. Food is as uninspiring as the pay. Hardtack in the trenches, so stale you need to soak it in tea or risk breaking a tooth. Thin gruel in medieval camps, bulked out with mystery meat that tastes suspiciously like rat. Salted pork in Napoleonic campaigns, so tough it doubles as armour if strapped to your chest. Meals are less about eating and more about negotiating with your stomach. Just get it down, and I'll never complain again. You will. Battle arrives, and suddenly your body is a statistic in motion. Arrows hiss overhead, cannon fire cracks like thunder, rifles snap with mechanical precision. You crouch, you charge, you stab blindly at shapes in the smoke. The man next to you falls, eyes wide, and you keep moving because stopping is worse. The ground turns slick, your ears ring, and you realise that for all the speeches about honour, no one mentioned the part where you'd be slipping on mud mixed with blood. In ancient wars, you line up shield to shield, feeling the press of bodies, smelling sweat and fear. Spears thrust, swords clang, and you're so close to death you can feel its breath on your cheek. In Napoleonic battles, volleys of musket fire rip through ranks, men dropping like dominoes, drums pounding a rhythm that feels grotesquely cheerful. In the trenches of World War I, mud swallows your boots as shells scream overhead, the ground shaking as if the earth itself is trying to shrug you off. Each age has its weapons, but the effect is the same. Chaos that makes you wonder how anyone survives at all. Sleep becomes a luxury. In medieval campaigns, you curl up under the stars, cloak pulled tight, praying rain doesn't soak you. In Napoleonic camps, you huddle in tents that smell of sweat and mildew, boots still on, because you might be roused at any hour. In World War I, you try to close your eyes in dugouts crawling with lice, rats, and the occasional corpse propped like a rude roommate. Dreams blur with nightmares, and sometimes you wake unsure which is worse. Humour, though, refuses to die. A soldier in the trenches sketches cartoons on scraps of paper, mocking officers with noses too big. A medieval levy jokes that the real enemy is his blisters. A French conscript hums bawdy songs so filthy they'd make priests faint, turning misery into punchlines. You laugh because laughter is lighter than fear, because the universe can't take both your hope and your sense of humour. Not at the same time, anyway. The worst part isn't always the battle, it's the waiting. Days of nothing, of digging trenches, sharpening spears, polishing boots, listening to rumours. You shuffle cards, roll dice, carve wood, anything to fill the silence. Every rustle makes your shoulders tense. Every shadow looks like the start of an attack. You begin to crave action, even though action is death, because at least action breaks the monotony. When injury comes, medicine is more threat than relief. In medieval wars, wounds are cauterized with hot irons, screams echoing across camps. In Napoleonic times, surgeons hack off limbs with saws, no anesthesia, only a leather strap between your teeth. In World War I, you pray the field hospital has morphine, but often it doesn't. Infection is the real executioner, creeping in through dirt and blood. You lie there, fevered, muttering nonsense, while flies buzz like cruel nurses. And then there's home, or rather, the idea of it. Letters, if they reach you, are treasures. A few lines from family, a reminder that the world still exists beyond mud and gunpowder. You read them until the ink smudges, until you've memorized every word. Sometimes, though, no letters come, and silence is its own kind of the wound. You imagine home carrying on without you, fields ploughed, children growing, and you wonder if anyone will remember your name once the war swallows you whole. You might survive. Many don't, but some do. You return limping, scarred, hollow-eyed, carrying stories you don't tell. Villagers cheer your return, but they don't want details. They want the myth of glory, not the reality of mud and screams. You nod, smile, raise your mug, but inside you replay every sound, every face, every absurd moment of survival. You carry war like a second skin, invisible but unshakable. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into a world where your life is measured not in years but in usefulness to someone else's army, where your childhood ends with a pike in your hand, where your adulthood is spent marching towards someone else's horizon, and where your death is penciled into the margins of a general's report. And yet, even here, you endure. You laugh, you sing, you write your name on a trench wall, defying the mud to erase it. You survive, if only so someone later can say, "He was here. He mattered." The sound of the ocean is gentle, but the sails overhead flap with menace. Tonight, let me take you into the centuries of colonial conquest, when the arrival of ships meant more than trade. It meant upheaval, disease, chains, and the quiet unravelling of entire worlds. If you were born in the Americas after 1492, or in Africa when European forts dotted the coasts, or in Asia where spice-laden ships anchored, your first cry came into a world already marked for change you did not choose. The ships appear like ghosts on the horizon, their white sails billowing, crosses painted proudly, cannons tucked like teeth at the sides. To you they look like strange birds, unnatural in size, carrying men who wear metal hats and smell like salt and ambition. They step ashore with flags in one hand and weapons in the other. Their smiles stretch wide, but their shadows stretch wider. You might be curious, perhaps even welcoming, but history will show that curiosity was a luxury you could not afford. If you are an indigenous child in the Americas, the danger begins before you understand it. The strangers bring more than steel. They bring invisible companions, smallpox, measles, influenza, illnesses against which your people have no defence. You watch as fever sweeps your village faster than blades ever could. Grandmothers collapse, mothers cough blood, children shrink into skeletal frames. Sometimes entire settlements vanish within weeks, not because of war, but because of microbes. Imagine being told the gods were angry, when really the problem was the sneeze of a sailor. And still, conquest doesn't stop with disease. Lands are claimed, maps redrawn by hands that never touched your soil before. This belongs to Spain, they declare, or this is now English territory, as if words could erase generations of belonging. If you resist, soldiers march with muskets and dogs trained to kill. If you surrender, priests arrive, pressing baptism into your forehead and Latin prayers into your ears. Your own gods are dismissed as demons, your rituals burned, your temples toppled stone by stone. In Africa, the story twists differently but with the same cruelty. Traders demand bodies as currency. The slave trade grows, each voyage stealing sons, daughters, fathers, mothers. Shackled in chains, you're herded onto ships where air is a luxury, where screams echo in the dark. Months pass in the stinking belly of the vessel, and when you finally see light again, it's not freedom. It's the auction block. Imagine being reduced to muscle, priced like livestock, your very humanity haggled over. If modern people complain about bad job interviews, you'd laugh bitterly. At least theirs don't end with a whip deciding their fate. In Asia, colonization arrives through ports and contracts. The Dutch East India Company, the British Raj, corporate empires with flags of convenience, spices, silks, tea, porcelain, all flowing outward, while taxes and monopolies strangle local hands. You're born into a system where your family's harvest no longer feeds your village, but instead fills ships bound for markets thousands of miles away. Hunger grows, not from famine of nature, but famine of policy. You toil in rice paddies or textile workshops, earning wages so pitiful you joke that the mosquitoes live better than you. What does daily life look like? Exhaustion, mostly. You rise before dawn to till fields that no longer belong to you, crops measured and taxed by men who don't speak your tongue. Your back bends, your palms blister, your spirit frays. Food dwindles because tribute must be paid. Some nights you eat broth so thin it mocks the word soup. Children grow up thin and wary, already learning to bow, to nod, to keep eyes down when colonizers pass. To look directly at power is to invite punishment. Yet resistance simmers. You hear stories of villages that rise up, of warriors who refuse chains, of leaders who defy. But resistance often ends with burned fields, mass hangings, or entire communities marched into exile. Still, the whispers spread. They cannot own us forever. Hope lives in murmured songs, in secret rituals, in carved symbols hidden in plain sight. You hum these tunes while working, and the overseer thinks you're just keeping rhythm. He doesn't hear the defiance tucked between the notes. Religion becomes both weapon and shield. Missionaries press crosses into your hands, promising salvation, but also condemning your ancestors. Some accept, blending old traditions with new prayers. Others hide their faith in shadows, worshipping in caves, in forests, whispering names of gods under their breath like stolen treasures. Belief becomes a battlefield of its own, fought not with swords but with silence and memory. And the absurdity of it all. Colonizers insist they are civilizing you, even as they whip your back, drain your land, and sell your children. They draft legal codes declaring you subjects, while building mansions from the wealth stripped from your soil. You want to laugh bitterly, because it takes a special kind of arrogance to destroy someone's life and call it charity. One Englishman even writes about how grateful you must feel for new roads, forgetting you already had paths before his boots muddied them. Still, even here, humour survives. Someone quips that colonizers must be vampires, since they always arrive pale and leave fat. Another mutters that if God truly sent them, he must have been drunk. You chuckle in the fields, careful not to be overheard, because laughter is rebellion disguised as relief. The worst is when hunger strikes. Famines in colonized lands often aren't accidents, but consequences of policy. In Bengal, rice rots while people starve, grain exported to fill imperial coffers. In Ireland, the potato blight is worsened by landlords exporting wheat. You sit at an empty table, stomach hollow, while ships heavy with food sail past your coast. If irony could feed, you'd be feasting. And yet, life persists. Weddings happen, children are born, songs are sung. You carve wooden toys for little ones, whisper stories of ancestors, share stolen moments of love. Colonizers may own the land, but they cannot own every heartbeat. You cling to identity, to language, to rituals, passing them quietly to your children like smuggled heirlooms. Remember who you are, you whisper, even if saying it aloud is dangerous. One day, revolts will grow larger, nations will demand freedom, flags will be lowered, and independence declared. But for you, born at the height of conquest, those days are distant. You endure the humiliation, the hunger, the fear. You survive, not because survival is easy, but because survival is the only form of resistance left to you, the worst time to be born. When ships arrive and redraw your world without permission, when your body, your land, your labour become someone else's property, when survival itself feels like treason to your ancestors and defiance to your oppressors. And yet, you live, stubbornly, quietly, carrying memory forward so that history cannot erase you entirely. The city sky glows grey, not with clouds but with smoke. Tonight, let me take you into the smog-choked heart of the 19th century, when to be born in an industrial town meant trading childhood for soot and lungs for wages. If you were unlucky enough to open your eyes in Manchester, Birmingham, or any of the booming factory towns, the first lullaby you heard was the rumble of machinery, and the first toy you touched was probably a lump of coal. Your family lives crammed into a row house, bricks sweating damp, windows smeared with grime. The air inside is hardly better than out. Smoky fire, sweat, mildew, and that faint tang of sewage creeping up from the street. You wake to coughing, your father's hacking bark, your mother's weary wheeze, your siblings' shallow gasps. Everyone coughs. It's the background music of your life, as familiar as birdsong in the countryside. Only here, the birds are gone, choked out or simply smart enough to move elsewhere. Childhood isn't a season of play, it's a contract. By the time you can walk steadily, you're set to work. Maybe you're sent into coal mines, a small body perfect for crawling through tunnels too tight for grown men. You carry baskets heavier than you are, scrape your knees raw on stone, and learn to fear the blackness that presses in like a second skin. Lamps flicker, walls creak, and sometimes, without warning, everything collapses. You pray not to be in the wrong shaft when the earth decides it's hungry. Or perhaps you're in a textile mill. The air is hot, humid, filled with fibres that stick to your throat and eyes. Machines roar louder than thunder, their gears snapping like jaws. Your task might be tying broken threads, your small fingers darting between moving parts. Children are valued because they're small enough to crawl under looms when they jam. You learn quickly that hesitation costs skin, sometimes more. Accidents are common. A sleeve caught, a finger crushed, hair yanked so violently it scalps you. The overseer shrugs. There are always more children waiting at the door. School, only if your family is unusually lucky or unusually stubborn. For most, letters and numbers are luxuries. You learn instead the alphabet of survival. C is for coal, L is for lint, D is for dust, and T is for too tired to keep going. You count wages, not books, and wages barely stretch. A child might bring home a few pennies a week, coins that vanish into rent and bread before you even get to smell them. You joke bitterly that you're working for the landlord's supper, not your own. Food is basic, repetitive, and often inadequate. Bread, potatoes, tea if you're lucky, meat once a week maybe, milk watered down, vegetables wilted, water unsafe, stomachs growl constantly. Children lick plates clean, not because they're polite, but because hunger is the only etiquette that matters. Malnutrition shows in your bones, in your teeth, in your stunted height. You look 10 but feel 40. And then there's the air. Smog isn't an occasional nuisance, it's a permanent roommate. Chimneys belch smoke until the sky forgets how to be blue. Soot settles on your skin, in your hair, between your teeth. You blow your nose and find black clots. You cough until your ribs ache, your lungs whistling like leaky bellows. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, asthma. They stalk your street claiming neighbours in a steady rhythm. You don't need doctors to tell you why, but doctors wouldn't matter anyway. They cost more than you'll ever earn. Home is not refuge, but extension of hardship. 10 people crammed into 2 rooms, damp walls dripping, Straw mattresses crawling with lice. Privacy doesn't exist. Bathing is rare, not for lack of desire, but for lack of water, soap and time. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, sometimes three to a bed. Bodies pressed together, not out of affection, but out of necessity for warmth. You joke that the fleas pay rent too, though in truth they run the household. Religion offers escape, or at least distraction. Chapels fill on Sundays with coughing congregations, voices rising in hymns. Ministers preach patience, humility, the promise of heaven's reward. You nod along, half comforted, half annoyed. Heaven sounds nice, but bread on the table tonight would be nicer. Still you sing because singing drowns out the factory whistle for a while. Entertainment is rare but precious. A street fiddler, a travelling show, a public hanging, grim but popular. Children chalk games on pavements, chase each other through alleys, laugh even when lungs ache. Jokes spread fast, about bosses with noses big enough to sniff profits, about coal dust being the city's official seasoning, about rats being better fed than workers. Humour is rebellion in small doses, a way to stay human while the world tries to grind you into gears. If you survive childhood, you grow into adulthood already aged. Bones bent from labour, lungs scarred, teeth rotted. And yet you keep going, because stopping means starvation. You marry, pack more bodies into small rooms, send your own children into mills. The cycle repeats, each generation coughing a little harder, living a little shorter. Average life expectancy in industrial towns dips into the 30s. You joke grimly that birthdays aren't milestones, they're miracles. Still, not all is despair. Out of soot and suffering rise movements. Workers begin to organise to demand shorter hours, safer conditions, fair wages. You hear whispers of strikes, of unions, of reformers fighting in Parliament. It feels distant, dangerous, but hopeful. Perhaps your children will breathe easier. Perhaps their laughter won't be drowned out by looms. Hope becomes a strange companion, fragile, easily crushed, but stubborn enough to survive the smog. And beauty exists, even here. A sunset streaks orange across the smoke, briefly turning filth into fire. A song drifts from an open window, lilting and sweet. A loaf of bread shared feels like a feast. You catch these moments and pocket them like treasures, proof that life isn't only toil and coughs. Even in a city where chimneys outnumber trees, the human spirit insists on sprouting weeds through cracks. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into an industrial city where your childhood is bartered for coal, where your lungs fill with ash before your lungs fill with dreams. And yet, even there, you laugh, you sing, you whisper stories to children in smoky rooms. Because survival isn't just enduring hardship, it's insisting on joy, however fleeting, in the face of a world determined to suffocate you. The streets outside glitter with powdered wigs and velvet gowns, but in the quiet corners of history you know the truth. Being born a woman often meant being born into a cage. Tonight, let me take you into the world of centuries when beauty was measured by suffering, when laws carved ceilings into stone, and when the body itself became a battlefield of fashion, custom, and control. You open your eyes as a girl and immediately the rules arrive. In China, your grandmother reaches for your tiny feet, wrapping them in cloth until bones splinter, toes curl inward, and every step for the rest of your life is both agony and ornament. Lotus feet, they call it, praising the shape even as you limp. The pain is constant, but worse is the reminder that walking too far, toward independence, toward freedom, is no longer yours to claim. In Europe, centuries later, the script changes but the theme remains. Corsets replace bindings, ribs squeezed until breath becomes a luxury. A wasp waist is the goal, though wasps at least get to fly. You learn to faint gracefully at parties because fainting isn't weakness, it's fashion. Doctors warn about compressed organs, but society shrugs. After all, what's a kidney compared to compliments? You smile through dizziness, tugging laces tighter, muttering sarcastically to yourself, "At least I'll die cinched and stylish." Marriage looms, but not as romance. It is transaction. In Rome, fathers arrange it. In medieval villages, lords approve it. In Victorian parlours, dowries decide it. Your heart has little say, your womb has all the weight. Your currency disguised as a bride, transferred between men like parchment contracts. Love, if it arrives, is a pleasant accident. More often, You wake beside a stranger who measures you by your obedience and the sons you deliver. And childbirth, you remember our earlier journey there, becomes a roulette wheel. Each pregnancy is another toss of the dice, and every dice throw comes weighted against you. Hemorrhage, fever, exhaustion. If you survive, society calls you blessed. If you don't, they call you replaceable. Either way, your story is written in the margins of someone else's ledger. Daily life is equally constricted. Education for boys, property for husbands, voting, don't even joke. In some eras, you're legally considered a minor your entire life, no matter how many wrinkles line your face. Imagine spending decades being told you can't understand politics, even as you manage households, markets, and sometimes even kingdoms. You roll your eyes so often, you wonder if they'll get stuck. Work is relentless, though invisible. Washing, spinning, cooking, hauling water. Tasks so constant they blur into background noise. You scrub until your hands crack, then listen while men brag about their hard day in the fields. You resist the urge to point out that without your bread their ploughs would be useless. Instead, you mutter under your breath, "Yes, dear, tell me again how heroic your turnip planting was." Fashion itself becomes an instrument of torment. Powdered lead whitening creams that eat through skin. Mercury-based rouges that poison slowly. Hairstyles so elaborate you need servants to hold your head still. Foot binding, corsets, veils, crinolines. Each century invents new ways to declare your body a display piece rather than a living thing. Sometimes you laugh bitterly, wondering if the real witchcraft was convincing women that pain equals beauty. And when you try to step outside the lines, accusation. Outspoken women are witches, hysterics, or meddlers. Clever women are mocked, feared, or silenced. In Athens, philosophers debate democracy while their wives are barred from leaving the house without permission. In medieval Europe, women healers are accused of sorcery if their remedies work too well. In the Renaissance, the same men who paint muses in glowing oils lecture that women should remain silent. It's a historical magic trick. Admire the portrait. Ignore the sitter's reality. Yet even in these centuries of cages you find cracks. Queens rule empires, sometimes by wit sharper than swords. Peasant women manage farms when husbands vanish to wars. Nuns write books that still echo today, their cloisters buzzing with forbidden scholarship. In Ottoman harems, women maneuver politics behind veils, shaping empires with whispers. Resistance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet persistence, the steady refusal to vanish. And humour, blessed humour, keeps you alive. You and your friends share jokes while doing laundry. At least the sheets can get clean, unlike our reputations. You mutter to yourself when a husband snores, "If men truly ruled the world, why can't they at least rule their noses at night?" You tease children that corsets are just adult-sized torture devices, though they'll discover soon enough. Every sarcastic quip is a small rebellion, a reminder that spirit can't be laced as tightly as waists. Love exists too, hidden between the rules. A glance across a marketplace, a secret letter slipped under a door, a whispered joke in bed that makes you both laugh despite the weight of expectation. These moments are fragile, often fleeting, but they remind you that you are more than property. You are human, feeling, capable of joy, even when history insists otherwise. Sometimes, change glimmers. The suffragettes march, skirts muddied, banners raised. Women sneak into universities, publish under false names, push back against centuries of silence. Each step forward feels tiny, but to those born into shackles it's monumental. You clap softly for them, even if only in your imagination, because they carry your hopes across generations. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into a world where your gender predetermines your cage, where your feet are broken to fit beauty, your lungs squeezed to fit fashion, your voice muted to fit decorum, and yet you endure. You cook, you laugh, you sing, you raise children, you tell stories, you write, you resist. You carry the weight of generations on your shoulders, not because you want to, but because you must. And somehow, despite it all, you leave traces. A line of embroidery passed, down, a diary tucked in a chest, a joke whispered to a child who laughs and remembers. You leave proof that you lived not only as property but as person. And those traces, however small, echo forward until the walls of the cage begin to crack. You are born, and from the first breath the world tells you your worth, not by your voice, not by your heart, not even by your strength, but by the caste carved into your name, or the religion scribbled on your forehead, or the station into which fate tossed you. Tonight let me take you into those centuries and societies where the accident of birth was not just circumstance but destiny, and where to be born wrong meant carrying chains no sword could cut. Imagine India centuries ago, where the caste system is less a ladder and more a wall. If you arrive in the world as a Brahmin's son, people bow as you pass. Your words carry weight, and your mistakes are forgiven. But if you are born an untouchable, a Dalit, though that word comes later, your very shadow is considered pollution. Your hands may be strong, but they are condemned to sweep dung, to skin carcasses, to touch nothing sacred. A sip from the wrong well can spark outrage. A glance at the wrong person can invite violence. You grow up knowing the limits of your reach are not set by your arms, but by centuries of rules older than your ancestors' bones. Or picture medieval Europe, where religion is your passport. Born Christian, you're at least inside the gates. Born Jewish in certain kingdoms, you face restrictions, expulsions, forced conversions. In Spain, during the Inquisition, neighbours whisper and priests pry, ready to accuse you of secretly clinging to your faith. You hide rituals in kitchens, whisper prayers under breath, hoping no one hears. If you slip, if someone decides you're too different, the stake or exile awaits. Your children learn quickly that survival means secrecy, that faith becomes something you carry not on your lips, but in your bones. And in other lands, social hierarchies dig their claws deep. In feudal Japan, if you're born into the Brahmin caste, your life is bound to tasks deemed unclean. Tanning hides, handling the dead, slaughtering animals. No amount of skill or kindness elevates you. Samurai may walk past with swords gleaming, merchants with coins jingling, priests with blessings flowing. But you're invisible until someone needs your labour, and then despise the moment it's done. What does daily life look like in this world of invisible cages? It is small humiliations stacked like stones. You fetch water last, after the higher castes or classes. You eat scraps, sometimes forbidden to even sit at the same table. In markets, your goods are bought, but your presence is sneered at. In villages, children are warned not to play with you, as if your laughter might infect theirs. You begin to believe the lie that you are less, not because your soul doubts, but because every voice around you insists. Marriage is another prison. You cannot marry across caste or class without scandal, punishment, sometimes death. Love is a dangerous luxury, not because hearts shouldn't choose, but because society refuses to let them. A farmer's daughter may love a nobleman, but her love is called rebellion. A Dalit man may look at a higher caste woman, and his glance becomes a crime punishable by mobs. You watch as stories end not with weddings, but with funerals, victims of rules written in ink mixed with fear. And yet, even in this suffocation, small rebellions bloom. You sing songs mocking the higher castes when no one listens. You carve symbols in secret, celebrating the gods your oppressors forbid you. You tell your children bedtime stories that insist they are not less, that in the eyes of heaven, or the universe, or the ancestors, they are whole. Humour becomes your shield. If my shadow is poison, you whisper sarcastically, then why do they always seem to step in it? Laughter keeps you alive, a flame no law can snuff out. Some turn suffering into wisdom. Saints and poets emerge from the margins, their verses thundering truths the powerful pretend not to hear. Kabir, born low, mocks the pride of both Hindus and Muslims. Don't ask my caste, ask about my heart. Others too pen words that echo centuries later, insisting humanity cannot be divided neatly into ledgers. But for you, an ordinary villager, the poetry is survival itself, a reminder that even if the world names you untouchable, your voice can still touch. Daily work is endless and often degrading. You scrub latrines, bury the dead, haul carcasses. People wrinkle their noses at your labour, yet rely on it. If you vanish, the world collapses under its own dirt. You joke with neighbours that society treats you like smoke, hated when present, missed when gone. It's a bitter laugh, but it keeps your teeth unclenched. And religion, the same force that locks you down, sometimes offers escape. Mystical traditions whisper that all souls are equal, that suffering polishes the spirit, that salvation doesn't check caste or class. These words give you strength. You pray quietly, not for a throne or gold, but for dignity. Even in chains, you kneel with pride, believing the divine listens more closely to whispers from the ground than to shouts from palaces. Punishments for crossing the line are brutal. Touch forbidden objects, walk forbidden paths, love forbidden people, and the lash, the brand, the noose wait. Crowds gather, not with pity but with glee, eager to enforce the rules that cage them as much as you. You grit your teeth, not just from pain, but from the absurdity. The same people who fear you enough to ban your presence gather eagerly to watch it destroyed. The irony tastes bitter, but at least irony, unlike food, is never scarce. And still, life insists on being lived. Children laugh as they chase dogs. Women sing as they grind grain. Men crack jokes while hauling loads. Joy blooms stubbornly in the cracks. Weddings still happen within your circle. Dances still shake the dust. Feasts still erupt when someone slaughters a goat. You live loudly in the spaces society leaves you, claiming what fragments of happiness the rules forgot to confiscate. Sometimes revolts spark. Villagers gather with sticks and fire, shouting against injustice. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they are crushed. But each rebellion plants seeds that sprout generations later into movements, revolutions, declarations of equality. You may not live to see it, but your endurance feeds those roots. Your laughter, your songs, your stubborn survival, they echo forward until the walls begin to crack. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into a society where your very birthmark dictates your coffin. Where love is forbidden, work is humiliation, and worth is measured not by your deeds, but by your ancestry. And yet even here you endure. You sweep streets with pride, you cook feasts with laughter, you sing with defiance. You teach your children that cages may be built of law, but hearts are built of fire, and that fire once lit can never truly be smothered. The table is bare, the fields are empty, and the air tastes like despair. Tonight, let me take you into the cruelest of hungers, the famines that crushed millions, not only by nature's hand, but often by politics sharpening the blade. To be born in these times is to be born into a world where your stomach rules your thoughts, where bread is rarer than gold, and where history forgets the names of the starving even as it counts their graves. Picture Ireland in the 1840s. You arrive in a stone cottage, the walls damp, the thatch roof sagging, and the hearth flickering weakly. Your parents lean on potatoes as their one steady promise, and for years the soil delivered. But then the blight comes. Fields once green with proud leaves blacken overnight, stalks collapse, tubers rot into foul-smelling mush. You dig in desperation, praying for even one good potato, but your hands pull up nothing but slime. The famine has begun, and you are a child born into its grip. Hunger twists everything. A day once measured by chores and gossip becomes a countdown of how many hours you can last without food. Your belly cramps, your head spins, your body thins until your bones poke like scaffolding beneath skin. Mothers hush crying infants, not with milk, but with cloth dipped in water, tricking tiny mouths into swallowing nothing. You watch your father's cheeks sink, his eyes glaze, his strength vanish. The man who once hefted stones now stumbles carrying a stick. Food exists maddeningly, but it sails away in ships. Grain, cattle, butter, exported under contracts and laws that treat your hunger as irrelevant. You stand on the coast, ribs showing, watching carts roll by loaded with food you will never taste. The absurdity is so sharp it almost feels like satire. You starve beside abundance, locked out of the feast by politics sharper than any famine. Cross the world to Bengal in 1943, and the story rhymes. Rice harvests falter, but worse is the policy that diverts grain to feed armies and stockpile reserves. Traders hoard, prices soar, and the poor collapse in streets, bellies distended, eyes dull. Corpses pile at railway stations while trains whistle past, carrying food elsewhere. You are born into this chaos, and your first lullabies are not songs but the moans of the starving. And it is not just Ireland, not just Bengal. History is peppered with these cruel scarcities. the Great Chinese Famine of 1959 to 61, when misguided policies and drought left millions dead. The Russian Famine of 1921, when civil war and bad harvests combined into disaster. Medieval famines, when rains ruined fields for years, and parents made choices about which children might live. The soil is never just soil. It is the stage on which hunger and politics perform their grim duet. Daily life in famine is a series of humiliations. You beg at doors once open to you. You strip bark from trees, chew grass until your jaw aches, boil leather into bitter broth. You gnaw bones already boiled thrice, suck marrow until nothing remains. Children scour ditches for weeds, their small hands shaking. Women pawn jewellery, then clothes, then finally their dignity. Men leave for cities, hoping for work, often never returning. You sit by the hearth, staring at flames too small to cook anything, and wonder how long hope can fill a belly. Disease follows hunger like a shadow. Weak bodies cannot fight infection. Typhus, cholera, dysentery sweep through camps and villages, killing as ruthlessly as starvation. A child may survive months of hunger only to collapse from a single fever. Funerals multiply until graves blur together. The churchyard becomes a forest of sorrow, crosses leaning drunkenly under the weight of too many names. You joke grimly that the gravedigger is the only man with steady work, though the laughter catches in your dry throat. And still, politics hovers overhead, often crueler than the weather. Officials insist nothing is wrong, or that markets will correct themselves, or that divine punishment is at play. In Ireland, landlords evict starving tenants, cottages torn down, families wandering roads barefoot. In Bengal, grain merchants sit on sacks while children die in gutters. In China, reports of hunger are suppressed, villages told to celebrate record harvests even as they dig graves. You realize quickly that hunger is rarely just nature's fault. It is human decisions sharpening every pang. Yet in the midst of despair, humanity refuses silence. People share scraps, though they themselves starve. Mothers divide crumbs into 5, eating none themselves. Neighbours carry the weak on their backs, whispering, "Just a little further, maybe food waits there." Folk songs arise, bitter and mournful, mocking officials, mourning children, naming hunger itself as an enemy. Laughter emerges too, absurd and sharp. If the famine keeps going, even the rats will pack their bags. It's humour edged with pain, but it keeps spirits from collapsing entirely. For children born in famine, play is not about dolls or sticks, but about pretending hunger doesn't exist. You toss pebbles, chase shadows, laugh until your ribs ache, then groan because laughing hurts when your stomach is empty. You draw pictures in dirt of overflowing tables, feasts you've never seen. You imagine bread so soft it melts in your mouth, meat so tender it sings. These games are cruel comforts, but they remind you that imagination still belongs to you, even when food doesn't. Some escape. Ships sail from Ireland to America, packed with the desperate, many dying on the voyage. Families flee Bengal villages, clinging to railway trains, scattering across cities. But escape is survival's lottery, and most tickets lose. You, born without coin, without connection, remain rooted in the soil that betrays you, waiting for rain, for relief, for a miracle. And yet, survival happens. Somehow, some endure. Your body thins but doesn't break, your spirit cracks but doesn't collapse. When rain finally falls, when policies shift, when markets open, you plant again. Seeds go into the ground with trembling hands, prayers whispered over each furrow. The first green shoots appear, fragile but defiant. You watch them sway in the wind and feel something like hope stir in your hollow chest. The worst time to be born, perhaps, is into a famine where hunger gnaws from within and politics presses from without, where your cry at birth is already an apology for another mouth to feed, where your life feels balanced on crumbs and chance, and yet, even in famine, life persists. You sing lullabies with empty stomachs, you share laughter between coughs, you carve hope into the soil again and again. Because hunger can steal strength, but it cannot kill the stubborn will to survive. The night grows softer now, and the noise of history, the clang of swords, the coughing in smoky huts, the cries of hungry children, begins to ebb like a tide pulling back from the shore. You have trudged through centuries of suffering, winters that bit like wolves, famines that hollowed whole villages, Wars that demanded bodies as if they were kindling, and cages built of caste, law, and custom. You've walked past plague carts and gallows, through trenches and smog, under skies darkened by ash and politics alike. And still, somehow you are here, carrying the echoes of those who endured the worst times to be born and still found ways to laugh, to love, to sing. Let your shoulders drop. Imagine the world quieting, as if every page of history you've just turned is slowly closing. The fires that once roared now burn down to embers, glowing warmly instead of fiercely. The air no longer stinks of famine or smoke, but cools into something gentler, like a garden after rain. You're safe here, not in the chaos of the past, but in the hush of memory, where even the harshest scenes can soften into lessons instead of threats. Think of all those who lived before you, who bore hunger, chains and sorrow, yet still carried forward enough strength that you are here tonight, listening. They found ways to pass on songs, to whisper prayers, to cradle children despite fear, to joke even when laughter seemed impossible. They remind you that survival is not just teeth-gritting endurance, but also stubborn joy in the face of cruelty. That even in the bleakest years, humanity refused to vanish. Now, as the pace slows, imagine lying back, wrapped not in ragged wool or smoky straw, but in calm. The stars above are no longer indifferent judges, but gentle companions, steady and bright. Each one could be a lantern carried by those who came before, lighting your way now, reminding you that darkness is never complete. Breathe slowly, inhale the quiet, exhale the weight of centuries. The plague bells fall silent, the factory chimneys stop coughing smoke, the war drums finally rest their sticks. What remains is the soft murmur of wind through trees, of rivers flowing, of the steady rhythm of your own heart. The worst times to be born belong to history now. You carry their memory, but you do not carry their hunger or fear tonight. Tonight, you let their struggles fade into a lullaby. Strange, haunting, but softened by distance. You're safe, here, in the present, wrapped in quiet company. So let yourself drift. Imagine warm light spilling across fields where no famine threatens. Imagine homes where no child is taken by war, no mother risks childbirth alone, no neighbour whispers accusations in the dark. Imagine a world gentler than the one behind us, a world you can step into now, if only in dreams. The journey is done, the lamps of the past dim, leaving only a faint glow to guide you into rest. You're not alone, you never were. The long, strange story of humanity hums quietly around you, and tonight it hums you to sleep. Close your eyes, let history soften into silence. Rest, because you have walked far. Rest, because the night is long but gentle. Rest, because even in the worst times humanity carried forward to this moment, to you, safe, breathing, and ready to drift into peace. Sweet dreams, Chat G.